Hello, this is Shan Chandrasekar welcoming you to another delightful special on our program. As part of the Achievers, we featured some of the finest of individuals from around the world, from all corners. We are very delighted and honored to present the Consul General of United States of America, one of the largest economies in the world, none other than the Honorable Susan Crystal. Susan, what a pleasure to see you.
Shan, thank you so much. It's just delightful to be here with you today.
Well, it's wonderful to meet you again. By the way, I was always impressed with your courteous nature. Tell us a bit about the importance of the American Embassy in Canada and the consulates in Canada. 400,000 people normally cross the border, of course, without the pandemic. The longest border in the world, which is undefended. Tell us about the importance of this relationship.
Well, thank you very much. Certainly from the United States perspective, the relationship with Canada is just a wonderful, collaborative, interactive relationship on the trade issues, on the people-to-people part of it. We're the same families, the same communities on either side of the border. Within the U.S. mission here in Canada, of course, we have our embassy in Ottawa, and then we have 7 consulates throughout the country, starting in Halifax, through to Montreal and Quebec City, here in Toronto, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver. So we really run the whole country because it is such a long, as you mentioned, undefended border, but it's really important for us to be represented here to both assist American citizens. As I'm sure you know, there are hundreds of thousands of American citizens here in Canada, and so that is one of the primary things that we do here at our consulates and at the embassy to support Americans, whether they are registering a birth of a child here in Canada, or there's a passport issue or travel, etc. But of course, we are also focused on the relationship. So here at the consulate in Toronto, part of my job is to promote trade between the two countries, investments in the United States. We have a commercial service at our consulate. We have political and economic officers. We have our public affairs team. We work on various types of exchange programs. We look at opportunities to improve the relationship. It's already a great relationship, but how are ways that we can make those connections between our countries even stronger?
That's fantastic. In Canada, we're used to cabinet ministers, but in the United States, you're a senior diplomatic corps official, officially recognized in the rank of a minister counselor.
Correct.
What does that exactly mean?
So it's it's a little bit different than the public service here in Canada or in other countries. So we start out. We have basically in the U.S. government, we have kind of several kinds of public servants. So we have what we call civil service, so there's kind of like the public service here, and then we have the foreign service. So in the foreign service, we work our way up, much like the military, getting different ranks and different levels. And so fortunately, I've managed to make my way up the ranks, as it were, and serve as a minister counselor, and then sort of our next level would be our career minister and then career ambassadors. So those are our top, so I guess I'm third to the top, I guess.
It's wonderful. Well, you as a former assistant secretary, you were in a very important department with respect to culture and education.
Yes.
Please elaborate on that.
So before coming to Canada this time, because I was in Ottawa previously, we can talk about that later, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Professional and Cultural Exchanges, a long title, focusing on our educational and cultural programs at the State Department. So I had it was a fabulous job because I had a wide range of programs that I oversaw, everything from our International Visitor Leadership Program, which we just celebrated 80 years of bringing up-and-coming leaders from around the world to spend time in the United States with their counterparts, to our programs at the high school level, where we bring young people at the high school level to come and spend a year at American schools. So, and everything in between. We had programs in sports diplomacy, programs at the professional level of exchanges. We have various programs that we look at ways to connect the United States and other countries. So our focus in a large part was on women and women and entrepreneurship, and how do we work through sports to get more girls into sports, because there are lots of statistics that show that women who have become leaders, many have participated in sports because they learn the value of teamwork, they learn the value to working with others, or whatever sport it might be. And so we have a lot of programs in that area as well. And so it was just a delightful program, because all the time I got to meet up and coming leaders from across the world, and then those that they were working with in the United States as mentors, as support, as ways to show off what various organizations are doing in the United States and trying to connect them with their counterparts overseas.
You've been a very well-known proponent of diversity. Tell us about your experience in this.
Right now in Canada, I think, as you know, last year, President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau had it was the first official meeting, it was virtual, of course the President couldn't come here, but they laid out a roadmap for partnership between our two countries, whether it's trade, defense and security, but one of the key areas was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's certainly something from my experience that is looking back on my career, something I've always been interested in. I think I recognized that I had opportunities that perhaps not everyone had, and as I worked at our various consulates and embassies overseas, looking for ways to diversify our staff, looking for ways when I was in Washington to bring people into the State Department that might not have thought, hey, there's a job for me here, because I might not see someone that looks like me. And I had the great opportunity to work in what we now call our Global Talent Management Office, which is human resources. And I worked with the 14,000 members of the Foreign Service as we worked with them as they moved up the ranks, as they looked for assignments, as they looked for opportunities. And one of the things in global talent management is it's great, we work for opportunities where we bring people into the State Department who might not have thought there was a job for them there, but importantly, how do we keep them? The whole sustaining people in their jobs is a really important opportunity. And I think certainly with the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're working through here in Canada, it's been very worthwhile. We actually have a diversity and inclusion committee of members of our consulate who are looking at what are we doing, but one of the great things that we're able to do is invite people from the Canadian community who are working in the same area to come and brief us and tell us about the things that they're working on, so that we can learn about best practices and get some ideas as well.
What were the highlights of your other Washington posts?
Oh, excellent. So in Washington, I've had a number of interesting positions. Previously, in the same Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, I was the head of our alumni office. So as I mentioned, the State Department has been doing exchange programs since the late 1940s. So whether it's our International Visitor Leadership Program or the Fulbright program, which you might be familiar with, we've been bringing international participants to the United States and sending Americans overseas. But of course we realized some years ago, in sort of the early 90s, I guess, that we needed to make sure that there were ways to keep connected with alumni, because they came to the United States, Americans went overseas, and we wanted to make sure that people were using the information that they learned and try to keep them connected and keep us connected with them. So I had the opportunity to work in our alumni office, and we created, which at the time was actually a precursor in a way to Facebook. It was our own alumni network that we did online, and we're able to connect alumni from all the various countries and then look for ways to continue the interaction with them and as how they interacted, bringing up the next generation. So that was a really exciting position. A previous job I had worked in Ecuador, and I had an opportunity to work, which we call on the desk, where you worked in our Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs in Andean affairs. So to see what was going on from the Washington perspective with Ecuador. So I had the opportunity to meet with the then ambassador from Ecuador to the United States, and at the time was able to prepare our then ambassador who was going out to Ecuador for her time there. So that was really an exciting and kind of a fun job. And then in the late 1980s, I had the opportunity to work in our European Affairs office, and I worked in what we called our support for East European democracy. This was just as the wall fell in Germany, and we had the opportunity to work with all of the countries of Eastern Europe and the Baltics as they were coming out of communism and working on things like education, teacher training, working on things in market economies, because they were countries that didn't do that for such a long time. And so that was a very fascinating opportunity as well. And while I was in that office, had the opportunity to travel to the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in the early 1990s, just as things were opening up. And I was part of a group of American officials from a number of different agencies to see what were the needs and how could the U.S. government assist.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, we're doing a television special with the Honorable Consul General from the United States of America to Toronto, none other than the Honorable Susan Crystal. There is more to come on the program. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're doing a television special with Honorable Susan Crystal, the Consul General of the United States of America to Toronto. You also had a fascinating experience being placed in Australia.
I did.
And of course, you went to Mauritius and South Africa, where there is a large South Asian population actually. And a lot of them have emigrated to Canada as well.
Indeed.
So please tell us about your experience there.
My first assignment as a diplomat was to South Africa. This was during the 1980s, during apartheid. And it was a difficult yet rewarding opportunity.
That was during de Klerk's government, is it?
Correct.
Right.
And interestingly, speaking of former Prime Minister de Klerk, he came on one of our exchange programs, the International Visitor Leadership Program, early on in his career. He was an up-and-coming leader. And there was an article that was written in the New York Times after his time, and there were some things that he saw in the United States that I think surprised him about blacks and whites working together, et cetera, which we like to think, might have affected his decisions ultimately in the change that he took in South Africa with Mr. Mandela. But so in South Africa, it was quite a difficult time in the history of the country. But for us at I was at our embassy as well as our consulate in Johannesburg, we did a lot of work in the black community and in the Asian and the Indian community. And so there was very, very worthwhile opportunities. I had the opportunity then, we were building a now called Rosa Parks Library in Johannesburg, and I was a relatively junior person, but I was given the opportunity to help with the oversight of the library. And it still exists today. And it was an opportunity for young black South Africans to come to a reading room, because they didn't have places in many cases to do that in a safe place. And I was back in South Africa some years ago and had the opportunity to go out and see it, and it's grown and it's still active. So you kind of feel like, okay, like I've made a difference there. So that was exciting. And then ultimately had the opportunity to serve in Mauritius, which was a wonderful assignment. It was my first real look at the South Asian, particularly Indian community there. And it was a really fascinating assignment. My late husband, who was South African born, was a big fan of things, the former British Empire, cricket, Indian food, all of that. And I really got to learn to eat it, as you're walking on the streets and you have your dal puri, like that's what you do. And so that was a very fascinating assignment. And I think as well what I learned there was how, it's such a multicultural community there, and yet it's a democracy. It's one of the few, long-term democracies in Africa, and an economic powerhouse too, for being such a small country. And so the opportunity to see how people were working together was, quite a great assignment. And then later on, got the chance to serve in Australia at our embassy in Canberra, and there, as the public affairs officer, I had the responsibility of our other consulates as well in public affairs. And again, it was, you know, a complicated time. It was during the Iraq War, and Australia was a big partner of the United States, but there were a lot of people in Australia who were not in favor of the war, like in the United States, like in Canada. So that was a complicated opportunity as well to look at from the public affairs perspective, and how that we, were telling, what we were doing in the war and why we had engaged, et cetera, and had the opportunity there. Then President Bush came to Australia, had the opportunity to help with that program. And then my little personal story, my then 5-year-old daughter, at our embassy in Canberra, which dates from the 1940s, we had started when then First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt came to Australia to dedicate our embassy. This was during the war, right? In the early 40s. And she planted a tree. It was kind of you've been to Australia, it's kind of a barren
That's the
place.
only continent
Haven't been there yet.
No.
So
I
Canberra's,
do a lot of work, I do a lot of business with Australia
There you
because
go.
we own the Australian cricket rights.
that's
so
important.
we bring from Brisbane, from Adelaide,
Of course.
from Sydney, from everywhere, but unfortunately I haven't been there yet.
Well, it's in Canberra, it can be a very dry continent. And so the embassy was on a bit of a barren plot of land. And so they said, oh, well, we'll have the First Lady plant a tree. And so that started a tradition that any time a cabinet level official came, they would plant a tree. So President Bush's father had come to Australia, he had planted a tree. He said, I want to plant a tree. So then our ambassador said, well, maybe we can get you someone to help plant the tree. So they talked about it and they said, oh, well, are there any of the kids at the embassy, we had a lot of children, whose birthday is that day? And it was my younger daughter's 5th birthday.
Oh.
So she got to plant the tree
That's
with
wonderful.
President George and Barbara Bush.
Wow.
And we have a lovely photo, and my other daughter got to be in the audience. And it was, that was kind of a fun little memory that we have. Every now and again, I'll reach out to my colleagues that are still there, and I say, take a picture of the tree. I want to see how it's growing. But it's a wonderful tradition that we have there. And in fact, just recently, the Roosevelt tree died, but they were able to take pieces from it and replant, so they've kept it going.
In your exciting diplomatic career, what was it like to meet the American president?
He was just very direct. You shook the man's hand and you felt like there was a connection. So it was quite exciting.
Since then, have you met any other president at all in the United States?
I haven't met. We had an opportunity when President Obama was president. I was in Washington. He had a gathering with senior diplomats, senior folks from the State Department. So we were in the same room, but didn't get to meet, him personally. But I've had the opportunity to meet some of our secretaries of state on various visits. Madeleine Albright came when I was in Haiti. Secretary Rice came also when I was in Australia. So I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of folks there as well, which has been exciting. And certainly Hillary Clinton came when I was in Ottawa.
Our hearty congratulations. Recently, United States has elected a vice president who is a member of the visible minority, first of its kind in America.
Yes.
And she's of part South Asian, part West Indian, Caribbean origin.
Correct.
Have you ever had a chance to meet her at all so far?
I have not, but I think we're hoping that she might make her way. I think, as you know, that she's got some high school years in Montreal.
Yeah.
So we know she knows Canada. So we're hopeful that maybe we'll see her here one day. You never know.
Shan will join us after this break. Do stay with us.
Welcome back. We're doing a television special with Honorable Susan Crystal, the Consul General of the United States of America to Toronto. It's fascinating that you mentioned about your trip to Australia, about Mauritius and in South Africa and other places. After that, you had a tremendous experience in your first visit here in Ottawa, prior to you being appointed as the Consul General in Toronto. So tell us about that particular experience.
Right. I did. I was in Ottawa about 10 years ago as the head of our public affairs office. And even though I'm from Pennsylvania, a neighboring state, my first time out of the country was to Niagara Falls and to Toronto in the 1970s. I never really thought necessarily about serving in Ottawa. And I learned so much, not only about Canada, but I learned a lot about my own country because of the relationship that we have, that we share. There's just so much that goes on between our two countries. one thing that stands out during that time, I had the opportunity one Memorial Day, our Memorial Day in the United States, there is a small community in the Halifax area, I got to represent the embassy, where they celebrate and commemorate the Memorial Day every year because there are sailors from the War of 1812 who are buried there.
Oh.
And who would have ever thought that I'd be representing my country at a Memorial Day service in another country? And so when the opportunity to come to Toronto presented itself, I literally jumped at the opportunity because I really felt that the relationship is so important that if I had an opportunity to add to that, the relationship again, that I would be silly not to try to come here. And so I'm delighted to be in Toronto to continue that conversation with Canada.
That's wonderful. You also had a short trip to India. You went to New Delhi.
I did.
So tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, so I was there. I mentioned that I was working on alumni opportunities, and we had an alumni training program for a week in Delhi, and we were sponsored there by the U.S. Embassy. And we had people from all over Asia actually who came for the training program. And it was just fascinating to, after having lived in Mauritius, to see, India itself and have an opportunity. I was amazed. I mean, I think I knew in my head, but I was amazed at it just is a city that never sleeps. Literally, I think it was not till 6 in the morning did things seem to quiet down. But it was just so vibrant, it was so exciting. The food, of course, is wonderful. The people are wonderful. It was a really great experience. And if I had the opportunity to go again, I would take it, but it hasn't presented itself yet. So I'll get to focus on the Indian cuisine and the Indian experience here in Toronto then.
How would you compare when you visited South Africa, especially during the apartheid?
Yes.
And now in the United States, you've elected a visible minority woman as a vice president. How do you feel about it?
It's a tremendous achievement, both for her, for Kamala Harris, but I think it's an achievement for the United States. I mean, I think in some cases people might say, it's long overdue. It is long overdue, but it's wonderful that we managed to do it. And the fact is that, she has made her way up through the ranks as well, and she's doing a fantastic job. And so I think that, bringing that so much in the United States, and I think this is what we find in immigrant communities across the world, it's that backstory. Where you came from, the adversity that she and many others have overcome in their lives. I see that in Canada, I see that in the United States, and that they've managed through education, hard work, support from their families. That's such an important aspect, I think, from their parents. Whether we know that a lot of people that come from immigrants, come with not a lot, sometimes a shirt on their back, literally, but yet they've, come into communities. And I think we see that certainly here in Canada, in the United States, where we see immigrant communities where they sometimes will go to where there are many others so that they can, it's a little easier, but then ultimately look for opportunities to kind of move beyond that comfort zone and be a representative of their communities.
Interesting. You've got a remarkable academic career as well.
When I was in high school, I had, through a history teacher, learned about the Foreign Service. I really didn't know anything about it, although where I'm from in Pittsburgh, it is and was then quite an international city. And I heard about this and I thought, well, maybe this would be something I would like to do. And then I visited Penn State University, where I ended up going to university, and my cousin was in vet school there, and I found that they had, a Foreign Service degree. So I had the opportunity to go to school there, did a study abroad in France, so French is the language that I had learned growing up. And then also had the opportunity while I was at university to work with the International Student Office, and so again got an expertise and some insights into other students who came as international students to my country, and then worked for a couple of years for a member of Congress from Texas, and had the opportunity to learn a little bit more about our legislative process, which then when I ended up taking the Foreign Service exam, had the opportunity to use that. And then ultimately, after the time period that I was working in our human resources, global talent management, had the opportunity to go back to school for a certificate program on leadership coaching. So this is an opportunity to, assist people as they're sort of maybe going through a difficult time, to sort of help them find in themselves the path forward.
You also had some grassroots level experience working in a constitutional office in the U.S. Congress for one of the elected Congress.
Correct. And so it was quite a fascinating look at really how our democracy works, because being the legislative branch, not only did the member of Congress himself, was working on legislation and programs, but also, you're answering letters from constituents. So, you got to see a range of the issues that how average American citizens are interacting with the federal government. And as a legislative assistant and constituent services, had the opportunity to help answer those questions. And then also from the congressman's perspective, what was going on in his district. So he looked at part of Houston, so we got to meet the people that went on, on the in the NASA programs. So that was kind of a fun opportunity to meet people who were astronauts, and Sally Ride, who was the first female, we had our picture taken with her, and the opportunity to, really see, again, another barrier broken with a woman going into space.
By the way, our hearty congratulations on a very successful United States, Mexico, Canada trade agreement. We are very excited about, there's one aspect there which is of very significance for us in the broadcast industry,
yes,
which is really copyright enforcement. So we are very thrilled with that, and we hope that United States will motivate Canada not to let grass grow under its feet.
I know that you and the station here are doing an awful lot of work in that area, so I commend you, and I know under the USMCA that is an important component that we will continue to work towards.
Thank you.
So congratulations on your work in that area.
Appreciate that very much. Any help we can get from the U.S. government would be deeply indebted.
Thank you.
What was your most pleasant experience that you can think of in your entire diplomatic career? I know it's a hard question, but I'm sure there's several of them. But if you were to highlight just one or two important moments, what would they be?
The best. Well, it's hard. It's hard to say. I'd say that in every country almost, I've had a great opportunity. One of the first things that I've always remembered, because I've worked a lot in exchanges, because as a public diplomacy officer in the State Department, that's really my sort of bread and butter, education and educational exchanges, cultural programs. But as I mentioned, in South Africa, my first post, and we've always done in the State Department a lot of programs at the high school level. And so at the time, we had an opportunity to send some young Black South Africans to the United States on a summer camp program, where they weren't in the camp, they were working at the camp. It was sort of an exchange, right? They could bring a cultural aspect of what they did in South Africa while they're, learning about the United States. And then after the end of the couple months, they got a chance to spend, I think, about 2 weeks on a bus tour to the United States. So one of the young men that I had nominated and had gotten selected was somewhere in the Northeast, and then was making his way on the bus tour through Pennsylvania, where I'm from, into Washington, D.C. And at the time in Pennsylvania, the license plates said, "You've got a friend in Pennsylvania." Are you nice? License plates have little slogans. And so the person who was leading the tour explained, this is the state of Pennsylvania. It's a key state in the Union, second state to sign the Constitution. And, you can see on their license plates, "You've got a friend in Pennsylvania." And the young man was relaying this story to me when he came back to South Africa. And he said, I piped up and I said, "I already have a friend in Pennsylvania." You realize that, you've provided an opportunity for someone to change their lives. They have to take the work. And ultimately, we hired him at this library that I worked at in Johannesburg, and he's still a librarian there today. And but he started out with that connection to the United States, through an exchange program. So I think for me, the power of exchanges, the power of opportunity really resonate with me. And I think I've certainly seen that in various countries. When I was in Mauritius, there was a big Model UN program. I think you know what that is, where high school students and college students participate and they become members of a particular country, and they represent that at the Model United Nations program. So we, in the embassy there, we always supported the school, the high school that was the United States. They would come in, we would give them briefings, etc. So it just so happened that the 1 year that I was there, the school that represented the United States was the John F. Kennedy School.
Oh, wow.
Funny, And so the students from that school ended up, one of the students ended up being one of the top winners of the program because he had done such a great job with his debating skills, and I think we had provided the base, we had provided some of the expertise, but then he took it and ran with it. So it was just really exciting to hear that this young man who representing the John F. Kennedy School then ended up being the U.S. team did really well, and then he was one of the top achievers in the program. So I think from those perspectives, those are the kinds of programs that I think always have resonated with me, and I feel like I've been able to help someone move on their path, whatever that might be.
You hold a very important position of being the emissary of most economically advanced nation in the world, representing the United States of America in Canada, in Canada's largest city, in Toronto. As a role model, how would you advise youngsters, if you go back to your high school days or college days, in terms of the importance of education and career goals in life?
Thank you. I think that what I say, and I try to do a lot of mentoring, and I've done that over my career as well, first of all, I think it's important for people to have an idea of what they want to do and then sort of go for it, right? In some cases, I think I find particularly younger people who might be, well, I can't reach out to that person, they're too busy, or no, I don't know that I can really do that. Well, how do you know you don't until you try, right? And if somebody reaches out to me looking for advice or somebody connects them, I always try to be, timely in getting back to people, because sometimes it's a little scary even just to ask a question, right? And so I think people have to feel that, they have that opportunity. I've had the opportunity, probably starting back when I was in Australia, to host interns, U.S. interns, from to work in our consulates or embassies overseas, as well as in Washington. And I keep in touch with many of them, 20 some years later, because, well, of course now it's a lot easier on social media to keep in touch with people, but it's great just to see where it's taken them. And I think the other side of, as you move up, is to make sure that you're always trying to be listening. You don't always know all the answers, even though you might think you do. And you can always learn from other people, and really just sort of paying attention to that, because everyone's got a fascinating story to tell. And I think it's always great to learn about that and then learn from that as you move, on in your career as well.
This is the first time you're visiting us in ATN.
Yes, awfully impressive. And the fact that you've been doing it for all these years. I'm really looking forward, now that I had the chance to see the 52 stations, now I'm going to have to go watch some of them, right, and see what's going on. But I think it's a great tribute to your communities, the fact that you do these in all these different languages, and it really gives, people, I think people find, in my experience, people coming to Canada that I've learned, there's always somewhere they can find, whether it's a community to live in, a restaurant, or a supermarket from their home community, whatever it might be. So I think that it's such an important thing that you do, because you keep the home alive, because I think people feel like they miss out on things. Now I'm in Canada, I'm not back where I came from, but so they get to see that, but then they also get to experience it through the Canadian eyes. And so I think, to me, that's a wonderful service that you provide to this wide range of communities.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Pan-Asian communities.
You're an extraordinary fund of knowledge. It's been an absolute pleasure having you in the program. May God bless you and your family, and we want to wish you all the best with continued success.
Thank you, Shan. It has been delightful to be here, and I look forward to our next encounter.
For sure. We'll look forward to that.